the Affordable Housing Trust for Columbus and Franklin County.
Okay, Maud Hill. So Maud, you're muted. You're still muted.
I'm Maud Hill from Homeport.
Okay, thank you, Maud. Marty?
Hi, Marty Anderson. I'm an attorney and I am a Development Commission member, and I'm still learning a lot. So appreciate being here.
Sure. Deborah?
Can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure. My name is Deborah Diggs. I'm a resident on the south side of the city of Columbus. I'm a community service.
Okay, thank you. And on behalf of the entire staff, I would like to thank the IRS for postponing their April 15th deadlines, which makes it easier for Deborah to join us today. And last but certainly not least, Lois Carson.
Good afternoon. My name is Lois Carson. I am a state president for OPSI ASME, where I represent classified employees across the state of Ohio.
Thank you, Lois. And then in terms of staff, myself, I'm Rita Parise. I'm the housing administrator. Let's go ahead first to Michelle.
Hi, I'm Michelle Castro Giovanni. I am the assistant housing administrator, and I'm also the interim residential tax program manager.
Thank you. Hannah Reed.
I'm Hannah Reed. I am in the director's office. I have been working with this group in housing for pretty closely here for about 3 years. I do a lot of our council work, but I also have been helping to implement the revised residential tax incentive policy, which took place in July of 2018, and we are ready for our re-up here in July of 2021.
Okay. Bob Jones.
Hey everyone, I'm Bob Jones. I'm the enterprise zone manager, and I work in the economic development division. Most of what we do is on the commercial incentive side. However, I also get to have a lot of fun with the downtown CRA. It's a pre-94, and it has both residential and commercial. So I guess I'm just here to talk a little bit later about what's been going on downtown last year.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Talisa Monaghan.
Hi, I'm Talisa. I'm the office assistant in housing for the tax program, residential tax program.
She is far too modest. She's the glue that holds the whole program together. And then, and then from our team, Brandy.
Hi, I'm Brandy. I am Rita and Michelle's sidekick and kind of the catch-all person. I do whatever needs done.
Yes, she does. All right. So I think that is all of our introductions. I hope I didn't miss anybody. If I did, speak up. Okay. A very brief overview of the Residential Housing Council. It is a creation of the Ohio Revised Code Section 3735.69. The very first section of that statute talks about establishing a community reinvestment area housing council and how that is comprised with appointments both from the mayor and from city council, and then one member from what is supposed to be the planning commission, but here in Columbus that is the development commission. And that is how Marty comes to us. The charge of the Residential Housing Council under the Ohio Revised Code is to make an annual inspection of the properties within the community reinvestment area and hear appeals. So for those of you who are asking, when did the inspection start, I will be pleased to tell you that with over 1,000 properties at the present time in our portfolio, we were not going to ask our council members, particularly during a pandemic, to jump in the car with us and go on inspections. We do have a team of folks within the housing division who do primarily construction oversight. Needless to say, in the wintertime is not the best time for roof replacement. There isn't any going on, and so it has been relatively slow. And so they were kind enough to go out with all the different addresses that are subject to abatement right now and do the exterior inspections on the properties. So what we will be trying to accomplish today is to have a discussion with Michelle on what the results of those inspections are and how we would like to proceed. The other thing that goes in this particular section is a discussion that prior to the end of the 31st day of March, that we are required to submit a report to the director of the Development Services Agency, providing a status update on all of the properties that are abated within the various CRAs. So the reason you are here with us on March 30th is that Michelle needs to press the button by tomorrow to submit all the reports. We have gone through, she has put the reports together. I have done as much review as humanly possible given the volume of reports that need to be done. We're ready to move on that, but you know, this is one of the requirements of the statute, so we are fulfilling that. We welcome you, and we certainly welcome your input. While the definition of the statute is relatively narrow about property inspections, potential revoking abatements and hearing appeals, certainly you bring, as community folks, a lot more to the table than that. And so we're going to try to give you, in the time that we have, as much depth and breadth about what's going on in the residential housing program in Columbus right now. So with that being said, we're going to move forward. The next item on our agenda is a report of the CRA status by area. We're going to allow Bob Jones to go first, and he does the downtown CRA. Bob? You're muted, Bob.
Here we go. I forget about that. I said, thanks, Rita. So I put together a little sheet yesterday and sent to Michelle. I don't know if Michelle sent it out to everybody, a little PDF. However, if she didn't send it out, what I wanted to relate about the downtown CRA is that it's been in existence since about 2004, and most of the development downtown has been on the residential side. In 2013, it was amended to also provide for commercial office abatements, as was seen that there was a need to expand that, and there was an initial pretty good little boom of commercial office development. In 2020, I certified 13 abatement applications downtown to the county auditor, and that pales in comparison to what Housing Division does with their abatement applications. And I know full well, I asked Michelle Merrick in January for some updated CRA reports that they put together, and she says, well, I'm kind of slammed right now. She said she received it seemed like 500 applications or something like that from housing. It was some astronomical big number. And I said, okay, I'm good. You do what you need to do. I'll figure out what I need on my end for some things. But just to give an idea of the amount of investment downtown last year in terms of dollars, there was $145 million in improvements that were made that were subject to abatement that I submitted last year to the county. Of those, most were residential, like 145 million was residential, and about 10.5 million was commercial. So there's still a lot of residential development downtown, and a fair amount of commercial development as well. Most of that was new construction. There was some renovation and even some historic renovation, which is important to help preserve some of the historic characteristics downtown. As far as new projects that came on board that I began files for, we had 14 project files, a little more balanced between commercial and residential, but 180 million, actually 180.6 million of residential projected investment, 122.9 in commercial. Of note, downtown, the biggest thing going on downtown right now is improvements made on the peninsula. There west of Cosi, between Cosi and the railroad tracks, there's I think 4 or 5 fairly large things going in. There's a hotel. There's a couple of big residential units going in. One with like 117 apartments, another one with 213 apartments, and then a new commercial office tower down there. So there's a lot going on downtown that continues, and even with COVID last year, there was just a lot of investment in real property improvements, not just downtown, but all over the city. So that's kind of what I've got in very brief. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to field anything.
Hey, Bob, do you track the number of units associated with the applications you submitted?
Yes.
For the residential?
I do.
How many total new units downtown?
Oh, well, I'd have to count them. I've got that data, but I don't have it broken out. But if you'd like to know, I can certainly put that together for you.
Okay, that'd be great, Bob. Thank you.
You bet.
Does anyone have any other questions for Bob? Okay, moving on. For the other CRAs, we're going to turn to Michelle.
Put your seatbelts on. So, hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. First of all, I'm going just to talk to you about the CRA data that we have. Most notable is we added 4 new CRAs in 2020. And so that is Grandview Crossing, Kenny and Henderson, Northland, and I have to scroll down, the Quarry, which is out on Dublin Road. So none of those new CRAs showed activity in 2020, which we wouldn't expect that to happen. Those projects, some are underway, some are not, and so we will probably be reporting on those next year in terms of activity in the CRA. We had, let me look, we approved 248 new applications or certified 248 new tax abatements in 2020. That being said, we received over like almost 600 files. And so there are a lot of files waiting to be approved. And that's why we always point out that Talisa is the glue that keeps us together. 42 of the abatements that were on the rosters expired. Most of those were in the older tax abatement areas, most notably 20 on the south side, I think was the largest group that expired there. That means we have 1,757 active abatements with all of the CRAs together. I spent some time in the last few months going back and filling in some data to just get an idea of how much money is that, and it's just under $900 million, sorry. So, and we'll be sending this summary out to you after the meeting. Of those, we only have 75 letters of inspection recommended, and so we'll talk about that in a minute. I did want to give you a quick update on what happened with the new legislation as it relates to documents coming into our office. We received, I didn't figure this out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 developer agreements. So when a developer is going to build a project in a CRA, they need to, a multifamily project, they need to fill out an agreement with the city that the director signs. And it's really their intent. It's like a letter of intent that they sign with us. They let us know how many units are going to be in the project. And so the largest of these projects is in Kenny and Henderson, and it was 400 total units. And of that, we will get 44 affordable units from that. The smallest one was a 4-unit project, and they were committing that all 4 of those units would be affordable. And that's Gears Avenue, and I don't remember where Gears Avenue is. You'd think I'd have all of these in my head by now. So you will get that too, just to get a summary of how the new legislation is going to impact affordable housing in the community looking forward. And then the last thing that I want to talk to you about is our visual inspection report. I had to collaborate with code this year. So there's one, and this was our text discovered, this one, it's on the hilltop. So there's one unit and their fascia and the rake cover is missing. And so that will be an easy fix for that homeowner. There is a large project in Livingston and James, and this is the information that I got from code. It's Apex Colonial of Ohio LLC is the owner, and I believe the name of the complex is Colonial Village. There were, I think it was 67 violations in that one neighborhood, and we actually got a couple more today from code, so I just need to follow up and get that addressed with them, from them. It ranges from everything from bare wood to holes in the mortar, missing bricks, security doors don't lock, and then there's solid waste throughout the complex. And so we're actually working in collaboration with code on that so that we can, as they take their code path, we can also take the tax abatement path and let them know their lack of attention to their unit is going to put their abatement at risk. And it was a little over $2 million abatement. So half of what you will see in Livingston and James. And then we go back to just single family homes and a little less shocking results for those. I'm scrolling, it's taking a minute. We have, oh, sorry, my computer's a little slow today. The kids must be home and playing games now. So North Central had just one, and it was peeling paint on the front porch. There was a sighting out in the Petzinger CRA. South of Maine, there were 1, 2, 3, 4. One was a loose handrail, and the others were peeling paint on either the handrails or the porches. And then there was one in Wyland Park. And again, it was just repair and paint the handrail that are at the steps. So if you know, Wyland Park's lots are a little sloped, and so they have steps put into the middle of their lot, usually with a rail up the side of that. So that is the letters that we will be asking you to consider allowing us to send those notices out to the owners. And that's all I have to report. Do you have questions?
Rita and Michelle, I have a question, please.
Go ahead, sir.
Michelle, you mentioned the Kenny and Henderson CRA, that there were 44 affordable units. Would you define affordable for me?
Sure, those are rented to and affordable to people making 80% and below of median income and 100% and below of median income.
And how does that translate? How does that translate to a monthly rental amount?
You know what, I haven't seen that. Rita, do you have that number in your head? She's our rental person.
I'm sorry, I don't have it memorized. And part of the challenge is that it fluctuates annually, and it fluctuates by bedroom size. And so I just can't memorize all those numbers at one time.
I wouldn't expect you to memorize it. I thought maybe there would be something written, on a document, because I'm curious as to distinguishing between affordable and simply, market rate due to size and other qualities of the unit. Since that's the ultimate goal here, is affordability and not just lower market rate value. So how do I get whatever document there is to tell me what, affordable translates to in that particular project?
I am
Sure.
looking for the worksheet that we created to help explain to the developers how they would get to affordable rent. And so we'll include that in your in the packet, but really we look out and we go look at the FMR, and then we take the 50% rent, which, and this was for the 2020 numbers. So you take the 50% rent for a 2-bedroom, which is $947. You multiply that by 2, which is $1,894. And then to determine the 80% rent, multiply 100 times by 80. And the 2-bedroom then would be 1515.20.
So I'm sorry, this is Deborah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Is it possible for the person that was speaking, asking the questions, to identify themselves? And you will find out, like she just said, affordable doesn't mean affordable. It just means that they're crunching some numbers. And if you work 3 or 4 jobs making a minimum wage job, I couldn't afford $15.40. That wouldn't be affordable for me. So, but can the person that's speaking, when people speaking, they identify who they are?
I'm sorry, Deborah. It was Michelle.
No, you're fine. The person that was asking the question.
That was me, Marty Anderson.
I thought that was you, Ms. Anderson. Okay, thank you for the question.
Sure. I would have the same question, frankly, Michelle, for, some of the other CRAs. I'm very new to this and I'm the first one to admit that I'm educating myself. And so I probably have questions of you that other folks take for granted. But I recall vividly my colleague Steve Gladman in the August of 2020 meeting, commenting upon satisfaction of some of these requirements with no real sacrifice, and what does that do to the public good? And that question has really lingered in my mind, and I think I'd like to explore that some more with all of your help, because you're so much further advanced in this than I will probably ever be. But I still would like to pursue that information and appreciate. We don't have to do it and take your valuable time here, Michelle. I can get in touch with you later.
Sounds like a plan.
Thank you.
I think Hannah's
Okay. Any other questions?
This is Steve
Okay.
Gladman. I have a question, and it really isn't about, it's a little off topic, but the legislation review for the tax incentives, where is that now, and what's the public input process for that? Because as Marty said, there's a lot of folks that are concerned that targeting probably needs to be rethought, at least in part. I think there's also a recognition that we need more units of housing of all kinds, and so maybe it's a bifurcated system or something else. But as others have said, when we look at the trust, when we talk affordable, we try to get below 60% and below AMI, and even at 60%, a 2-bedroom apartment's about $1,000 a month. That includes utilities, but the housing cost is around $1,000. So So I was just
Okay,
curious
so stay
what the
tuned,
process
Steve,
was.
because it's on our agenda as item number 7. All right. Any other questions? Okay. So next up is Hannah Reed. She's going to talk to us a little bit about the work we have been doing in creating new CRAs.
I think, Rita, the next 2 items actually are mine, the update on new CRAs, and then we will take a deeper dive into Steve's question about where we're going this year with our 3-year annual review, and that'll kind of touch on a little bit of what Marty asked as well. I'll try to kind of weave that together a little bit. So quickly, what I will do is, if you guys give me just a second here, I'm going to share a map on my screen, and we'll make sure that this is included in your packet. This is the current citywide CRA map. It is divided, so it's a little faint, at least on my screen. However, but it is divided into 3 colors. So the light green is what we call the market ready areas, and that is Short North. Here's the Kenny and Henderson CRA, Marty, that you were discussing. Short North, AC Humpco. Rita, what am I missing? 5th by Northwest.
5th.
And 5th by Northwest.
Yeah.
And Grandview Crossing. I'm sorry, apologies. That was the new one. The blue is the middle tier, which is ready for revitalization, and that list is more fingers than I have to count on. So they are all numbered. It's numbered over here on the side for folks. And then the yellow, the buttery pale yellow color is ready for opportunity, and that is Linden and Franklinton. One thing I will point out as you guys are looking at this map for the members that are new on here is a lot of these boundaries that you see that are just so big. Those were boundaries that were created prior to the policy change in 2018. And when you start looking at the smaller CRAs, those are areas that have been created after 2018. And one of the policy changes that we have implemented was that when creating new CRAs, we're basing them on census tracts for several reasons. One is the data that we use to analyze and categorize the CRA is census tract-based data. And then another reason is, if you guys know this, I'll use Franklinton as an example. The Franklinton CRA is huge, and there are different pockets of rate of development in in this larger geography. So it's not that large geography. There may be pockets that are not reflective of the category based on the averaging of all of that data for such a large area, and isn't reflective. I know the Southside CRA is also one that is huge, that has different rates of development. And so moving forward, we have used census tracts, which are a little bit more neighborhood based and more reflective of the area that we're creating. Are there any questions about any of the new CRAs or about this map as well? And there's an interactive version of this up on our website as well, that you can kind of click around and see what the requirements are, get to applications. It's an amazing tool. And so we'll make sure to share the link with you guys as well to pass along to your colleagues.
I do have another question, if I may.
Sure. Do you want me to leave the map up or stop sharing?
Totally up to you. This is a more generic question. Seth was kind enough to send me a copy of a couple of economic development agreements, because I'm also trying to educate myself about how an EDA interfaces with the CRA process. So, and I understand Grandview Crossing is an example of an EDA.
Yeah, so two big examples of recently created CRAs are Grandview Crossing, which is this tiny sliver here, and the Quarry. The Quarry and Grandview Crossing both had, not CDAs, EDAs, economic development agreements, that were executed prior to the policy change in 2018, where there were affordable housing commitments made in those economic agreements. So those when we did our transition language in 2018, one of the components in the transition timeline was if you have an executed EDA prior to the passage of this legislation, then whatever commitments were made in that EDA were honored. Because by the time we got to the policy, that project had been worked on and calculated up to that point. And so so if you had an executed EDA, and I do not believe, I could be speaking out of turn, so don't quote me on this, but I don't believe that there's any other EDAs that were done prior to July 2018 with other agreements. Rita, I cannot think of any off the top of my head, but I could be wrong.
Any other EDAs that were done outside of the CRAs that currently have affordability requirements in them.
Yes. Now, I will say, Marty, for the EDAs for Grandview Crossing and for the quarry, there were affordability components in those EDAs. Grandview Crossing aligns with the policy for market rate, so it is 10% of the units at 80% AMI and 10% of the units at 100% AMI. The quarry is going to be multiple phases. Phase 1 is slightly different than what the standard policy is, but phase 2 moving forward, phase 2 and any other future phases will be, they'll adhere to the ratio in the policy.
It looks like the EDA for the quarry was signed after 2018. Looks like it was signed in 2019.
But I believe it passed council. I think is the ordinance date. I believe the ordinance date. It was approved by council prior to that.
Okay, so the inaction, the date of the inaction is controlling.
Yes, the council action date.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions before I swing into where we are now and where we're going? All right, so in our policy, when we did the legislation in July of 2018, there was a clause in there that we know that our environment and our neighborhoods are rapidly changing, and these areas will not always be the category that they were in. Either they'll move to market rate, move down to ready for revitalization, move up. I mean, they'll move around at the rate of the development that's happening across our areas. So the goal was to capture the development rate here in the city and kind of keep up with where we are. So every 3 years, our policy will be reviewed. So those categories may change. So our existing CRAs are currently being reevaluated with the most current census tract data to see if any of those categories have moved. We have an internal working group that has representatives from all across the board, because we know that a lot of these projects do not live in a vacuum. A lot of them are mixed use. So we have our economic development partners. Part of this, we have our city council partners, we have our planning partners, because as projects come in, you know, especially with the market rate, with the five-story requirement or a density requirement, planning reviews those products or those proposals, and so we want them to be a part of the conversation as well. We have our entire housing team. I'm on it, as well as Hannah Jones from the director's office, who's our deputy director of community development, and so we're working on it. With our internal working group, we have hired an outside consultant, VSI, to run the data for us. And not only are they going to be looking at where our current CRAs are within the data, they're looking at, you know, how can we, are there improvements that we need to make? Is the value of the abatement, can we get more public good? And in this case, the public good that was determined from the original study is affordable housing. is it feasible to go, we say deeper, meaning can we go to 60% AMI? Do we up those ratios of 10% of the units and 10%? Is it 20 and 20? Is it 10 at 60, 10 at 80, 10 at 100? What is that formula? So they're running some numbers and data for us, very similar to how we got to our original 10% at 80 and 10% at 100. That HRNA, who was the initial overhaul incentive study consultant, was VSI was a sub with them. So VSI is very familiar with this program, which is why we went with them. So to your point, Steve, we're running that. We're looking at that. We know that. I think at some point, I can't speak to what that is going to be, but I anticipate that there will be changes to the policy come this summer. So we are actively working, been sending lots of data to the consultants so that they can analyze and get some stuff back to us. Another thing that they are also looking at for us is some our existing, I'll say legacy CRAs, so Linden, Southside, Franklinton, some of those larger geographies that we talked about. When we did the policy in 2018, we did not break those up at all into smaller geographies that are more reflective of the individual neighborhoods within those boundaries. We are now at a point that VSI is looking at that data as well. So there may be some breaking up of those larger CRAs into more reflective areas. So that is a large picture overview of where we are. In terms of public input, we know public input is super important for this project, and we did it in 2018. We did a series of community meetings. At that point, it was in person at rec centers across the city. I don't know where we'll be this summer, if it's going to be virtually across the city or if we'll be out in rec centers or not. But we did do community engagement, developer engagement. We're not quite at that point yet. We need a little more of the data to take out to the community, but there will be community and developer input. And, hey, what's working for this program? What's not working for this program? Just get a lot of general feedback. We here in housing, well, I'm not in housing, but the housing team's so in the weeds, right?
She's a housing cousin.
I'm a cousin. There you go. We're so in it every day that we might not see some of the big picture things that are not working well. And I know that our team, I've brought all of the housing team members on this program involved because they have things that work well and don't work well. We're really, really trying to get as much input as we can. So be on the lookout. This group will be really important. I think we've got a great representation of housing folks, community folks on this call. So when that time comes, we will make sure that you guys are included and share the info with you as well.
I have a question, Hannah, if I may. This is Steve. Besides AMI, are you looking at a different property type being allowed? Right now, the standard specifies construction type and podium parking and things like that. Those are all very expensive. Where the least expensive product is this 3-story walk-up, and we have seen with some incentives from the finance authority, with some abatement on sales tax and some cheap debt from us, where they've been able to bring kind of market rate, but bringing all the units in right at 80 or below, and in some cases, because of our involvement, pushing more of those units down into that number. Has that been considered or is the construction type, property type still contemplated to be the same?
So that's kind of why we have our planning colleagues in with us as well, because to your point, Steve, we'll still have the multifamily, so 4 more units in the single family, 4 and under unit type. We'll have the differentiation, but the goal with the 5-story podium parking, that component was a reflection of the data that was originally done in 2018. That those additional costs make the abatement X valuable, right? And that's how they got there. And I think, the goal also of the 5 stories was we want density. Just to your point, we need units. We need the density. We need units in our community. And the way the current policy is written, we don't have flexibility to waive the height requirement in a market-ready area if it's an all-affordable project, for example, right? If it's a 2 or 3 story, to your point, walk up, but it's all affordable, meaning 80 to 60 or whatever that number would be, we don't have that ability. And so I think that's something that has come up in conversation of, we need to be a little more flexible on that. If density is our goal, is height the right way to get that? I'm not a planner. I'm not a building and zoning expert person, but that is a question that has come up. So I think that's a really good point. So that was a roundabout way of saying that conversation has come up.
I think it's fair to say that really nothing is off the table. Everything
Absolutely
is on
not.
the table. I think the thing that, I do hear the frustration about should we have deeper targeting, should we have more affordable rents? And I certainly think that is an area that we need to do a deeper dive on this time around. I will remind you that the policy that was placed into service in 2018, frankly, is unique. We do not have other communities that are doing the same thing. And so what you have to be patient with us is that this is a grand experiment, and we are the laboratory people who are mixing these things together and hoping it doesn't blow up. And when you're doing something very experimental and very unprecedented, it's really best to take slow, short steps so that you are sure you are not stepping off the ledge into the abyss. So I do hear the frustration. I am an affordable housing advocate myself, and I do think that this is something that we need to take a closer look at. But by the same token, I think for an initial entree into this field that we have done something very significant. And I personally was able to speak at a national conference, and everybody was looking at me to be like, I didn't know this could be done. And Hannah and Michelle did a presentation at OCCD, and everybody's sitting in the room saying, oh, this is really possible. We can really do this. We can really look at CRAs differently than just a right. So I think that I would like to think that we're on the road to continuous improvement. And so I do hear what you're saying. I do hear the frustration. I think that you are not alone in your frustration. And I think that there are lots of us that want to see some bigger steps taken this time around. And so I would invite all of you to go on that journey with us. The folks that are in this group are bringing really important perspectives about what residential abatements mean in our community in a variety of ways. And so I would welcome all of your input, and I hope that you will be part of our journey as we go down this path and try to figure out what the next 3 years are going to look like.
I appreciate your comments, and my criticism isn't just at 60, 80, and 100. It's that you can get the 80 and 100 by doing very small units that I believe are really at market, and so there's not a big push down. But I will say that if we start targeting at 60% AMI, one of the consequences is no one will do it. They'll take a pass because they can't make the numbers work. So, I mean, what we do. That's very obvious. Same thing you see. We run the scenarios. We try to find where we can push more units down, but the properties still have to be viable. Even for a specialized lender like ourselves, we can't just facilitate, failure by giving people loans for projects that won't work. So it is a dance, and I just hope that we have a really long conversation about that, and then think about. And maybe in some of those existing areas, that the older areas, we look at that differently. We look at product type differently. There's certainly land costs that are different. The inputs are different. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of people engaged this time. I will say that one of the things I felt would happen is that all the developers would just buy out of the program, not do the units. But we've only had one that I'm aware of, and I'm aware because we get the money from them. We've only had the one, and that was a very small development, which probably doesn't make a lot of sense for them to try to do the units. So,
Steve, that's a really good point. It just triggered. So after Rita and Michelle were talking about the report that we're submitting to the state, another outcome of the policy in 2018 is that we are required by code to submit a very similar type report to City Council with the number, so a little more detailed towards our program to what Steve said. So how many developers to use the program, how many total units, how many affordable units, how many opted for the buyout. So that report is due to City Council no later than September 30th every year, but we have a lot of that information put together early because of the report that's due to the state. So that report will also be shared with this group once it is compiled, but that'll have some more programmatic specific details that we've been talking about in that report, not the state report. So.
And I want to echo Steve's thoughts and his comments and appreciate them. That is one of the reasons I've stayed on the council. We do need to have that voice for the individuals. We're looking at the housing shortage, apartment shortage, residential shortage, just shelter shortage, and the affordability. And the question keeps coming up, what is affordable and who is it affordable for? So I really do appreciate the comments made by the rest of the council members and the support that we can see going forward. Thank you. I'm sorry, this is Deborah.
Thank you, Deborah. Okay, so we've got a couple minutes if there are other comments or questions. So I think something we didn't specifically address, but I want to, is we're looking for the support of this council to move forward based on the physical inspections that we had, that we're not recommending that any abatements be terminated or terminated or revoked at this time, but we are going to be following up with those individuals that are out of compliance. So I wanted, if we could please have a vote of our council members as to whether we pursue down that path. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Okay, if there are no other comments, there will be a package of information that we email out to you that includes all the different topics that we were discussing today, as well as the map with the current CRAs on it. We will put you on the mailing list of folks that need to be notified as we start to come up with our data and start to formulate how we want to proceed on the triennial review of this program. We certainly welcome your time and your talent and your cooperation as we move down this path. I want to thank you all for joining us today. Like I said, I've been here, it'll be 14 years in June, and we have never had a turnout this great. So I really appreciate the fact that you are able to be so responsive so quickly to a very short notice meeting. I thank you for your time and expertise, and I wish you a wonderful afternoon. And meanwhile, there's another hearing at 5 o'clock, so tune in.